The winter storm swept through Chicago like a warning no one had taken seriously. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, swallowing streets, buildings, and sounds until the city felt frozen in time. Daniel Wright, the powerful CEO of a national logistics company, sat silently in the back of his SUV as traffic slowed to a crawl. He was exhausted from endless meetings and difficult decisions, but the storm outside felt heavier than corporate pressure. As the car passed an old bus stop barely visible through the snow, something caught his attention. At first, Daniel thought it was a shadow or a pile of snow shaped by the wind. Then it moved. His heart skipped when he realized it was a little girl sitting alone on the icy bench, her legs barely touching the snow-covered ground. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her jacket was thin, her gloves mismatched, and her small body trembled violently in the freezing wind. Without thinking twice, Daniel told the driver to stop. The driver warned him about the danger, but Daniel was already opening the door. The cold hit him like a wall as he stepped out, snow crunching beneath his shoes. The girl looked up at him slowly, her face pale but her eyes strangely calm. She didn't scream or cry like he expected. She just watched him as if she had been waiting. Daniel removed his expensive coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, noticing how light she felt, almost fragile. "You shouldn't be out here," he said gently. The girl clutched the coat tightly and whispered, "Mom said you're the only one who can help us." Those words sent a chill through him deeper than the storm. Daniel knelt in front of her, asking her name and where her mother was, but she answered carefully. She said her name was Lily and that her mom was sick and resting somewhere safe. She wouldn't explain how her mother knew him or why she believed he could help. Her voice was soft but firm, as if she had memorized every word. Daniel glanced around, hoping to see an adult nearby, but the street was empty except for people rushing past without stopping. Daniel called emergency services, but the dispatcher explained that help would be delayed because of the blizzard. Looking at Lily's shaking hands and blue-tinged lips, Daniel knew waiting could cost her life. He guided her gently into the SUV, turning the heater on full blast. As warmth slowly returned to her face, she relaxed slightly, though she still held onto his coat like it was her only protection. As the car moved forward through the snow-covered streets, Daniel's thoughts drifted to his own childhood, years spent in foster homes, cold nights, and the painful feeling of being invisible. He had built his success by never looking back, but now, sitting across from a frightened child, the past refused to stay buried. Lily stared out the window and quietly said her mom believed he would understand because he once had nothing too. Daniel froze. That part of his life wasn't public knowledge. In that moment, he realized this meeting wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of something he couldn't ignore. The SUV moved slowly through the snow-covered streets as emergency lights reflected faintly off icy buildings. Inside, the heater hummed, fighting the brutal cold outside, but Daniel Wright's thoughts were far from warm. Lily sat quietly beside him, her small hands wrapped around the cup of warm water he had given her. Every few moments, she glanced at him as if measuring whether she could trust him completely. Daniel felt the weight of that trust settle on his shoulders, heavier than any corporate responsibility he had ever carried. Daniel finally asked Lily to guide him to her mother. She hesitated, then nodded, pointing toward an older part of the city where abandoned warehouses and low-income apartments stood forgotten by progress. As they approached the area, Daniel noticed how familiar it felt. This was the same neighborhood he had escaped years ago, promising himself never to return. The coincidence unsettled him, but he kept driving, determined to see this through. They stopped near a dimly lit apartment building with boarded windows and a broken front door. Daniel carried Lily inside, shielding her from the cold as they climbed dark, narrow stairs. On the third floor, Lily knocked softly on a door that barely stayed on its hinges. A weak voice answered from inside. When the door opened, Daniel saw a woman lying on a thin mattress, her face pale, her breathing shallow. She was burning with fever and clearly in need of urgent medical care. The woman looked at Daniel with tired but determined eyes and whispered his name. He froze. She explained that years ago, when Daniel was a struggling teenager living on the streets, she had helped him with food, shelter, and kindness when no one else would. She had followed his success from a distance, but never imagined asking for help, until illness and eviction left her with no choice. Sending Lily out into the storm had been her last, desperate act of faith. Guilt and gratitude crashed into Daniel at once. He realized that the life he had built was partly shaped by the compassion of a woman he had forgotten in his race to survive. He immediately called for an ambulance, refusing to take no for an answer. As paramedics arrived, Lily held tightly onto his hand, fear finally breaking through her brave silence. Daniel promised her everything would be okay, and for the first time, he truly meant it. At the hospital, Daniel stayed until doctors assured him the woman would recover. He arranged for a safe home, medical care, and long-term support without hesitation. But more importantly, he stayed present. He sat with Lily, listened to her stories, and realized that success meant nothing if it wasn't used to protect those who once protected him. As the storm outside slowly faded, Daniel understood that the blizzard had brought more than danger. It had brought a reckoning. That night, he didn't just save a family. He reclaimed a piece of his humanity he had lost long ago, and in doing so, found a purpose greater than profit.